Butterflies return someday. Ooh, I had to record this one because I'm in my beautiful middle-aged years, but this one still gets me because many of my listeners and readers and folks who I've interacted with know that I am a survivor myself, and that a lot of these issues, I come often from a professional perspective of having worked in the field, on the front lines, on task forces, trainings, facilitating, all of that. But some things come back and say, I don't want another little girl to feel the way that I felt during that time. So alone. So like without a life raft anywhere. And I don't want that. So a lot of times when I have come back to this work, because I've, kind of left and tried to say, oh, well, I'm going to do something else. I've come right back. So there's a real conversation to be had about Black celebrities, Black journalists, and mainstream media. Now, there's a real history, a valid history, of Black artists being mocked, edited unfairly, exploited, baited, and used for spectacle. Those are things I write about. Those are things on blogs, particularly Survivor Affirmations and survivoraffirmations.com, because, I like to revisit it and talk about what was learned. What are the lessons, folks can get from it. So yes, there's a real history. There's a real history of media institutions profiting from Black pain while at the same time refusing to care for any Black people, not a soul. And that part is all true, all backed up with facts, receipts, all kind of stuff. But there's another truth sitting right beside it. I hope that we are not expecting Black journalists to protect powerful Black celebrities from difficult questions when those questions concern harm, abuse, coercion, violence, children, women, or public trust. Because see, that's not journalism. Now you're asking them to do reputation management. And many of these journalists, they're not your influencer. They're not trying to get people to go along with you. They're trying to get to the truth. If you're an influencer, respectfully, that's great. And that's what they do. But not so much your Black journalists. And do we want them to do that? And so when the celebrity at the center of the conversation was and is Robert Kelly, I feel we have learned so much, and we've grown so much as a community from looking at this, and this time looking at it from the perspective of survivors, because we got too many survivors in our community. Doesn't say that our community is, particularly more violent than anyone else's, because actually the facts don't bear that out. But what they do say is when something happens in our community, there aren't the helps and the supports and people trying to understand. They're more likely people trying to fit you into, hey, you came here for help, so now I want you, to work you over and fit you into this model, and then maybe I'll help you. So we got to have our own back. And so a lot of what I try to push forth is teaching us as a community to have each other's back, to help one another to heal and to deal with this, to confront it, and all of that. We can't pretend the only wounded person in the room is the famous man being questioned. And let me say for the record, on our site we have a post about R. Kelly, and we definitely recognize R. Kelly went through some terrible, traumatizing, horrifying things in his childhood, and I wish with my being that had not happened to him. The thing about it is what he did with that pain, and that's where we are with the multitude of victims. Now I'm going to go to Gayle King's interview with R. Kelly because folks are still talking about it, and that's okay. Conversation is great. She was criticized by some who felt she exploited him during a vulnerable moment. There was a celebrity that, her work I admire. I really like it. I'm a fan. She expressed a version of that concern in an interview and saying that she was tired of black artists trusting black journalists to I don't know if she used these words, and I don't want to misquote her, but something along the lines of take care of us, only to feel exploited by them. And you know what? I get that. Because it speaks to something many black people understand. That fear that our own people may be used by media systems that have no love for us. I get that. But here's where the question turns for me. And like I said, I got nothing, I got love for both of them. Who is the us? Who's us? And this is, when we come to these conversations, the us is always silent to mean black men and black boys. The us is silent, silently saying us does not include you women or you girls. Because it's us, only the black celebrity. It's us, only the famous man. It's us, only the artist whose music shaped people's memories. And I get that. Or does us include, two, the black girls and women who were harmed, who were doubted, mocked, exposed, pressured, silenced, alone, lonely, so lonely, and treated as, you're just collateral damage. Hey, this had to happen. This had to happen. Actually, it didn't. Because if protecting us means shielding a powerful man from accountability or from facing, just face yourself. While black girls are left to carry the shame for a lifetime often. Too often. You don't have to. Let me insert that because I think it's important. I often say counseling, healing folks, healing rituals, all that self-care can definitely help with that. But it's not easy. It's not an easy shift, and it doesn't shift just because you say, I forgive you. What about me? What about me? So while black girls are left to carry the shame of what was done to them, then us has been defined a little too narrowly. We left some people out of that us. That is the danger of reputation protection culture. I understand it. I am a part of this culture. I love this culture. I love us some us. And if I didn't, I'm not sure I'd be doing it. Certainly there are other things that I could be doing. Now listen, reputation protection culture sounds like community loyalty. It sounds like racial protection. It sounds like standing guard. It sounds like do not let outsiders destroy our people, I'm down for that. But too often it becomes, don't you ask him any hard questions now. Don't you make him uncomfortable. Do not embarrass him. Do not talk about that girl. Do not talk about those women. Those women. Do not bring up that tape. Do not name the pattern. I was telling a family member, and I was disappointed in the way a particular network had handled Robert Kelly coming on for an entertainment awards show, because I felt like they lured us in and didn't give us all the information. We didn't know he'd be on the show, and then they were like, he's Uncle Robert. It's like, he ain't my uncle. I got enough of my uncle's stuff. Trust me, I don't need this. So in talking about that, this relative who knows all about my pain and all about what I went through said, well, people have a right to work. And true, they do. But I also have a right to be ticked off about the way that was handled. Because there were too many of us sitting in the audience who watched this thinking this was a black girl, black woman empowerment moment. Yay. And then that just happened. It just happened. There are too many people who do not want you to speak, who want us all to feel responsible for his reputation management, even more than he felt about that. And in that silence, here's the thing. This is why it gets me, because there's such a disconnect. Because inside of that silence, black girls become disposable. And some of those black girls grow up and never outgrow that. And then you look at them and say, why is she like that? What is she doing that for? What is that behavior about? Why is she talking like that? Why this? Without acknowledging the part that we play in that. Because everybody likes a feel-good message that says, okay, teach me how to teach her to be a better person, quote unquote. Teach me what to do with her, what to do about her. And when you come in and you say, yeah, I'm not actually, I'm going to let her make her decisions about that. But what we need to do is correct the environment. Sort of like, the gardening thing. Like if your plants aren't sprouting and blooming and all of that, you need to look at the soil and the content of it and what's happening. And a lot of people just don't want to do that work because it's work. Reshona, and I'm not sure I'm pronouncing her name correctly, so I hope she forgives me because I'm reading her book and I like it a lot. It's a slow read for me because it's powerful. It's emotionally powerful. Reshona Landfair's memoir, Who's Watching Shorty? Reclaiming Myself from the Shame of R. Kelly's Abuse, makes that truth impossible to avoid. Ms. Landfair, who was known publicly as Jane Doe, especially like if you're Gen X, I'm Gen X. I tell y'all that all the time, I know. But you know what? It shaped us. It shaped us so much you can't even imagine. Anyway, she was publicly known as Jane Doe. And so many of us didn't really know for all the 20, 30 years or whatever who she was, but we knew that there was a young lady behind the scenes. And she writes about being the 14-year-old girl in the child video that became central to R. Kelly's later conventions, because there was a video. She was 14. So reading too ahead of myself. So someone described the book as her reclaiming her name and telling what it meant to be a child caught in the orbit of a powerful man, while the adults, the community, and the systems around her failed to protect her. Now, y'all know I got young people that I love. So I got some next generation folks, and I'm going to tell you that when these things come out, and it's like 20 years later or what have you, I don't know about the rest of y'all, but the kids look at you like, what was happening with y'all at this time? What was literally, what was wrong with y'all? Seriously, the stares you get from them are like, because they're putting together the puzzle pieces and they're saying, so what did y'all think when you saw the marriage license and vibe? Y'all just weren't going to do anything with that. Y'all just kept moving. I mean, of course, they don't understand. Like, we didn't have social media. But you know what? That's not an excuse. I get what they're saying. Y'all just, like, where were y'all? What did y'all do? And it's an eye-opening moment for them. And they're disappointed. They're disappointed. Very disappointed. And I get that. I can do nothing but receive it, because just like I received the good from the generation, I have to take the other parts too. Now that book matters because for years, much of the public talked about the tape, the case, the allegations, the scandal. But most importantly, his career. Most importantly, his career. But like so many unseen girls who may now be women, people forget, and we need to keep saying this and saying this and saying this, and I'm for the uprising of voices. I truly am. There was a girl in that story. You've been in your family and you know what it's like for people to keep carrying on. In your church, in your friend circle, in whatever. For people to keep carrying on. Wow. You're trying to hold yourself together with like masking tape. She was a real girl at the time. A little black girl. A child. A human being whose life was not supposed to become background material in some debate about whether or not people could still listen to songs. Now, the Chicago Sun-Times reported that Landfair's memoir traces her life under Kelly's control and her path from childhood to her pivotal trial testimony. It's a heroic journey. It's a journey. I love it. People reported that Landfair, who had been known as Jane Doe during Kelly's high-profile trials, announced the memoir as a way to tell her side of the story, her story, get some truths out there that aren't about anything about celebrity and PR and do you want about the music and oh, I got fat. None about that. Just, I was a little girl and then I was a young lady. And this is what this was. So she gets to do that under her own name. And that's not a footnote. That's actually the center, because she's the victim. She's the victim. And sometimes we get so confused with who the victim is. And let me state plainly. She's the victim. Reshona Landfair, and many others who have spoken out publicly. And there was a girl in that story, a human being whose life she wasn't supposed to be background material. She was supposed to be a girl. And so this is where Gayle King comes in. And we can look at that from a different light now. A black journalist asking questions about allegations of sexual abuse is not automatically exploiting a black celebrity. That's not what they're doing. Sometimes she is doing what too many refuse to do while the harm was happening, because she's asking questions when other people decided, okay, there's been enough questions. So when Gail comes up, she says, listen, we're going to put some of these questions, and she did it as respectfully as I think a journalist could. She was asking questions about what was, happening. Maybe people wanted that to be a PR thing, but victims don't have any little PR things they can go on to all too often. Not to go speak to Miss Gail King, you can't. Too often, that's not their story. It's so unjust and unfair. So she's putting the question back in the room, and for a lot of survivors, it's like, great. Because she is refusing to let the charm, the fame, the music, the expected loyalty, the money, the nostalgia, or public discomfort erase the person who was harmed. She's saying, in effect, hey, there were some girls here. There were women here. There were accusations here. And more than that, we got evidence here. There were systems, protective systems here. And then there was the expectation of silence here. Answer for that. Speak to that. And that is not betrayal. That's speak to this, please. The interview happened after years. And I mean years. Because like I said, when I saw those young people looking on our face, it was like, what were y'all doing all the time? It was hard to explain to them that this was years of those of us who were speaking up, taking a lot of slurs, threats, anger, absorbing all of that. Like we did something, like we didn't do this. But we are trying to get to the healing, get to the answers. And if those young ladies need something, we want to get to that part too. So then it took documentaries, reporting, criminal charges, and public debate. Dreamhampton. Thank you, Dreamhampton. It was not merely a celebrity gotcha moment. It was a public figure being questioned about alleged and later court-proven harms that involved girls and women. And now that Reshona Landfair has named herself and written her own book, Reclaim This Story, the old public framing becomes even harder to accept, because she was not like some abstract victim. Now we have to look at her, see her, hear her, read her words about what it was like to be that person while everyone was throwing all their stuff on her, throwing all their disappointments, all their angers at her. She was not a rumor. She was not a plot device in R. Kelly's downfall. She was a girl who should have been protected, and instead, for too long, the public seemed more concerned with the survival of his career. He can work, than the survival of her spirit. And that's the indictment, not only of one man, not only of one interview, not only of one journalist, but a whole culture that can become dangerously tender toward famous men and dangerously suspicious toward harmed black girls. And there's a better way we can hold this conversation, because we can say, yes, listen, black journalists, we do not expect you to reproduce racist spectacle. No. Black artists have been exploited by media, and many of us constantly uncover that history and speak on it and write on it and do theater work and do creative works. We got that. And I encourage us to do more. Editing, framing, tone, and institutional power, all of that matters and actually is very critical. Mainstream media, yes, it has often handled black suffering without the care it richly deserves. I stipulate that. And also, no black journalists, they are not required to protect powerful black people from the truth, particularly when there are women and children being harmed, and boys and men. No community loyalty should not mean silence around sexual abuse. That is not loyalty to the right thing. Because our loyalty has got to be around healing, love, accountability. It's often for his sake, too. No, a black girl's pain should not be treated as the price of preserving a black man's legacy. But the culture is harmed when black girls are made invisible. The culture is harmed when victims learn that they will be believed only if the accused person happens to be unpopular. The culture is already harmed when the community's protective instinct activates more quickly for a man's image than for a girl's mind, body, spirit, soul, and her future. This is why the word exploitation has to be, we got to handle that carefully. Because was R. Kelly exploited because Gayle King asked him a question about a trial he was going through? Or were black girls exploited while the music industry, audiences, media, fellow artists, fellow creators, and community silence allowed his career to bloom and flourish? Was the harm that he was interviewed, or was the harm that so many people did not want the right questions asked until decades later? Was the vulnerability in when his or theirs? Was the vulnerability always with the girls who had less money, less power, less protection, less credibility, and fewer adults around them willing to stand between them and a powerful man? See, those are the questions reputation, protection, culture avoids. Because once we ask them plainly, the whole room has got to shift. The issue is not whether black journalists should take care of us. The issue is who gets included in that care. Who's included in the us? Taking care of us must include black girls everywhere that they breathe. Taking care of us should include black women everywhere that we breathe. Taking care of us must include survivors. Taking care of us should include the ones who were laughed at, disbelieved, blamed, abandoned, slurred, and turned into anonymous court language, disappeared for someone else's convenience. Taking care of us should include the girl who is now a woman saying, I have a name. Reshona Landfair's book is important because it moves the conversation away from celebrity mythology and back to the child at the center of it all. It reminds us that Jane Doe was never a legal label. She was a girl that people failed. She was a girl people talked around. She was a girl people watched become part of a public scandal while too many still asked whether the music could survive, debated whether this was a legacy or that was important, but never was she important. Well, now she's speaking. That should matter more than any celebrity comfort at harming other people. We can all handle the truth with care. We can. We as a community have got to give ourselves a lot more credit, because we know how to care without hiding the truth to protect power. We have become masters at that. When a black girl is harmed and the public worries more about his career than her life, that's not culture protection. That's abandonment with some music playing in the background. Listen, I love us. And that us includes black girls and black women. And I think that, we can all get better. All of us, me included. All of us can get better at around pain. Around pain. Pain doesn't always come in the form of a song. Listen to all the variations and textures and tones of how people express pain. Thanks for listening. My culture is great. My culture is great. And we can get greater. We can be greater. All right. Thanks for listening. This is Tanya G.J. Prince. Thanks for listening. Y'all be great.